So we lived in this world of rules for 50, 60 years, and that worked pretty well. Living standards went up a lot, trade flourished, people moved around the world, commerce exploded. It was a period of prosperity and even rising democracy, a period when poverty rates fell a lot. So we accomplished a lot as a global community in the post-World War II years, right up until, let's say, about 2008. But that's all changed now.
The world is in a really strange place right now, especially when it comes to the global economy. We may never have seen a crisis like this before, or have we? Celebrated economist Chris Meissner is with us today to walk us through it all. Stick around. Boy, oh boy. So you are an expert on, among other things, economic crises through time. What a time for you to be that kind of a person, to have that kind of an expertise. The world is, I don't know, imploding, exploding. Before I get into panic mode and send the rest of our audience into panic mode, what are your thoughts about what's going on now? Have we seen this before? Anything like this?
Yeah, it's a difficult time, isn't it? Lots of things are happening day by day. It's hard to keep up sometimes. Uncertainty is one of the key factors that, stalks us daily. And in an uncertain world, people get scared and the economy tends to slow down and not great things happen. So yeah, it's a moment of worry and trouble, of great volatility and uncertainty. Have we been here before? Well, the history of humanity is checkered with crises, ups and downs. Of course, there have been dramatic situations in the history of mankind. Have we seen this precise configuration before? Well, of course not. History repeats itself moderately, more like some people might say it rhymes. It doesn't really repeat itself. But yeah, what do we have? We have a global superpower, the United States, which is feeling a bit isolationist at the moment and doing things erratically. Its allies have found out that it's not the reliable partner that it once was. And no one really knows what the next move is going to be. Are we going to take Greenland? Are we going to start a war there? Are tariffs going up? Are tariffs going down? Yeah, it's dramatic. It's certainly something that hasn't been seen for a long time. So we can get into how we got here from there, but I would say that the most striking parallel would probably have to be in the 1930s when things went a little wacky and sideways as well. So we could start to draw some comparisons there. We can talk about that.
Okay. Well, I don't know. Personally, I find comfort in the fact that it's not entirely new. Like, this is not, we've never been in a crisis mode before. We're a fairly young country and we've been in a crisis mode and the world has been in a crisis mode. Can we talk a little bit about how far these ripples extend? Is that unique to the time that we're in now? So, and we're talking about like country, that they're just like, they're finding themselves in a place where, they are bolstering themselves. I think because it has been a global economy, a very tightly woven and interconnected global economy. And now it seems like certain patches of the quilt are abandoning, they're falling apart and there are holes in the quilt all of a sudden. And am I wrong in assuming all this?
Fabric is definitely fraying. So why don't we talk a little bit about how we got here from there and why this is so dramatic. You may recall that after World War II, I think we tried to learn our lessons. The period of the war was obviously horrible in terms of human costs, lives lost, economic destruction. And so after World War II, we moved to a world that was rules-based. It was led by the United States, and that was supposed to keep us safe. What did we do? Well, we put in all these nice policies like lower tariffs, reciprocity, non-discrimination. We had the United Nations. The United Nations, one of the goals was to keep the integrity of territory and to avoid these grabs for land that had started World War II. So we lived in this world of rules for 50, 60 years, and that worked pretty well. Living standards went up a lot, trade flourished, people moved around the world, commerce exploded. It was a period of prosperity and even rising democracy, a period when poverty rates fell a lot. So we accomplished a lot as a global community in the post-World War II years, right up until, let's say, about 2008. But that's all changed now. The rules-based order is falling apart. The economy is less stable than it once was. Allies can't rely on their partners quite as much as they thought they could. Countries don't all play by the same rules. Some of them are very important players in the world and rising. And so I think those challenges require a new playbook. And we're seeing that unfold in a very messy way right now.
If I were to apply a personality to these eras, it almost seemed like it was kinder. You know, when we had that post-World War II, when we became a superpower, and we invested a lot in humanity. You know, that's when a lot of the social programs came out that you know, my father went to school in the GI Bill and had a wonderful career after his service. You know, we saw those things. They seemed more like investments in humanity. That doesn't seem to be the narrative that's associated with this particular thing. It seems to be almost a very anti-human, unless it's a very select group of humans that we're looking to benefit. Again, fresh air? I mean, is this virgin snow, or has this been a driver before?
Yeah, I think what you're hinting at is the rise in inequality that we've seen since the 1970s. It's really grown a lot. And the rise of inequality has put certain people and certain groups and certain industries right at the top of the pile in the pecking order, and they're going for what's best for them. That's a big difference from what we saw in the 1950s and 60s when inequality was pretty low. Well, prior to World War I, there was unbridled economic growth, laissez-faire. Global commerce flourished as well. There was a significant amount of inequality. Recall the Gilded Age, when the likes of Andrew Carnegie and J.P. Morgan stocked the country and had their way with it, really. To that, there was a big backlash. The progressive movement attempted to rein those powers in and did so more or less successfully. So there was kind of a backlash to that. But we haven't quite seen the backlash domestically to this rise in inequality that our ancestors saw in the late 19th, early 20th century. So life goes on where the rich and powerful, try to mold the country and institutions in their interest. And there's been relatively little pushback. And what we're seeing now is the kind of result of all that.
So I want to drill down a little bit into, again, my perception, and I beg you correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but it seems like there's this race for oil as a commodity. And it almost seems to be like, if I were looking at that income disparity, those who support a fossil fuel-based economy versus those who support a green agenda. It almost, that's like one of the lines of demarcation almost. You either want to save the planet or destroy it, or mine it for every last drop of oil you possibly can, and because that's a commodity, that's a commodity that we can make money on, and we can collect subsidies on, so on and so forth. And it seems to me that that's a lot of what's driving this unrest that seems to be emanating from the United States and from Russia and from Israel. That's they're oil economies, basically. There are other economies in the world that are really, I see, embracing the green, embracing the sun and the wind and as sources of power, and they are building their future around these embraced technologies. Do you see that as a factor at all? And if so, is that the possible out? Could that be the pressure relief valve that drives the end of this nonsense?
Certainly. Interesting points. I think the energy transition was sold as a move to reduce carbon emissions, and that was what was right to do in terms of climate change. But there are so many more benefits, right? The diversification of the energy sources leads to greater reliability in terms of shocks. It helps us avoid these sort of international conflicts about oil, and it protects us from, shocks that do occur when these types of, excursions arise. So right now with the Strait of Hormuz closed and 20% of the world's oil blockaded up in the Persian Gulf, oil prices are higher. And countries that are more reliant on solar and alternative energy sources are going to be protected from that shock. So it seems like the right move. Now, that's not the direction we're going, and I think that gets back to the issue of inequality and special interests that I was hinting at before. Who is this benefiting? Well, the United States is also an oil exporter, and it's quite likely that oil exporters are going to benefit from these higher prices. And does that help households? Does that help you on your commute? No, but does it help them? Yeah, sure, it does. What can we do about it? Well, we have to take a good look at our policies and, think again. Maybe that energy transition was the right move. It's been somewhat abandoned at the moment, but maybe we should think about it again.
Abandoned domestically. Internationally, again, China is really taking to this. There are other countries out there that are maybe have more of a deeper than a toe in the water. Scandinavian countries have always been very energy friendly. We see them increasing the manufacturing of electric vehicles and things like that. And the premise being, I can draw power from the solar panels on my roof to charge my car, to charge batteries that keep my home electrified, et cetera, et cetera. That must send oil into a panic when it comes to my commodity. My commodity is going. They're losing relevance left and right. And this seems to be like some petulant foot stomping in response to that. Don't take my commodity away. That's my bread and butter. That's, how am I going to afford yet the other yacht that I want?
Yeah, well, I don't know if everyone necessarily sees that way. I've been to United Arab Emirates, to Abu Dhabi, where, it is a petroleum-based economy, but they're seriously looking at diversification, of course, and they've done pretty successfully in the last 2 decades. So, Norway is a similar case, right? Reliant on petroleum exports, but cognizant that oil won't always be there and that you need to diversify. So I think enlightened oil exporters are in the game of diversification too. And you're right. China has laid down a lot of solar, and they did so not randomly. They did so because they knew they were overly reliant on oil and susceptible to shocks, strategic or just economic. They come along. So it was the right move. And it's odd, to say the least, that other countries aren't going, as hard on that as China. Again, we have nuclear power as an option too, which was taken off the table following the earthquake in Japan, a decade and a half ago. Strange as it may sound in a world where oil is running out. But I have hope that it will make a comeback yet again. But we're not quite there yet.
Yeah. And I've heard that Fukushima was built, my understanding, and again, if you are out there and you know about nuclear, or if you know about the nuclear energy, please correct me. But my understanding is there are different levels of plants. There's a level 1, which was a 3 Mile Island. And there's a level 2, which is Fukushima, and there's a level 3. And 3, with each level, you increase the security of the product. There's less waste. There's less, uranium or depleted uranium to bury into the ground or find a home for somewhere else in the universe. And it's also built on more stable ground. So that investment in nuclear the framework for it to become more stable and more safe, unless we can't do that because of we're going to have like 6-headed fish or whatever washing up on our shores, which could be delicious. I don't know, but I digress. So anyway, I see that as part of a cocktail of. Let me back up. I go down these rabbit holes. I want to make sure that I'm backing up, and I want to make sure that I'm establishing the narrative and letting you correct me. Is energy, do you believe, driving a lot of the unrest now that's going on?
Well, energy is important. We have to ask ourselves, is it a symptom or a cause? I think there are deeper issues, religious, ethnic fractionalization and fissures in the world economy. There's worry about strategic position vis-a-vis, say, China, in this country especially. Russia and Europe, that's a more salient concern. And those things are driven by energy, partly, but that's kind of been the tool, the weapon that these countries have been using to kind of defend themselves, if you will. I think the issues are deeper about territoriality and sovereignty, and when globalization occurs, and as it did in the last 60 years, nations get brought closer together. And not everyone's comfortable with that, because you have to make this trade-off. Do you want to be more integrated, or do you want to have your sovereignty? And there's a natural erosion of sovereignty that occurs when we globalize. And for some people, that's totally fine. They don't care if someone else sets interest rates. They don't care if someone from another community moves to their area and eats different food and speaks a different language. They don't care. But for other people, that's a real negative thing, and politicians can make great hay of that and run on that and rile people up all too easily. We saw that in the 1920s and 1930s with the rise of fascism and xenophobia and all that. And so we're here again, the anti-democratic forces are making a play and accusing globalization of all of these problems. And I think oil is just one piece in this big chess game, really, I think. Yeah.
I'm a Star Trek fan, not a deep fan. I don't quote me or don't ask me questions about like the first episode of season 2 or whatever. But that whole notion that a boogeyman exists to unite us, kind of a thing, like that I actually personally see falling away, like this whole thing about, the demonization of brown people, quote unquote. I'm air quoting my fingers for those who can't see me. Those cultures that it almost seems a tool, a narrative that could be applied to drive that kind of behavior, to say, well, people who are on the fence, who haven't thought about it one way or the other, all of a sudden they're thinking, oh, panic mode, defense mode, like you're tweaking the amygdala, like the fight or flight. I'm going to engage. This is bringing hostility to my, it's bubbling up for me. I want to be angry at something, and I'm going to be angry at brown people because, I don't know, I just heard that they're bad.
It's not necessarily even brown people. Let's look at Brexit. Yeah. 2015, they voted to take themselves out of the European Union. Immigrants from the European Union who, had the same skid toe were coming and allegedly taking too many of these British jobs. Again, sovereignty was a question there too. So, I think, greater integration just brings home this loss of sovereignty. And for many people, as I said, that's okay. But for many people, it's not. And when there's that kind of disagreement, I think politicians can really jump into the fray there. And these political entrepreneurs like Nigel Farage in Britain and Marine Le Pen in France, the AfD in Germany, even our own president, with the MAGA movement, they just jump into the fray and lay it out there. And people go for it. It's got strong appeal. It has so historically, and today it's still with us. It's interesting.
So thank you for pointing that. That's a strong bullet to fire. But I'm curious about what are the states of the economy during, almost like if you want to track it, like combative times, harmonious times, like when we're talking about global interconnection, or like we're fighting you for whatever reasons. How has the global economy fared during each of those seasons? Like when we play nice with each other and we understand, that we're global, that we're connected, we're like whatever. Does that create a better, stronger global economy?
Yeah, there's an intricate dance going on here. I think the evidence shows that the more integrated we are and the less likely we are to have international conflict. This is the international peace dividend, the theory of du commerce from Montesquieu. A lot of people have looked at this, including myself, and found some evidence for that. But all is not always well, and shocks occur. And things like the Great Depression or the global financial crisis really weaken our economies. They create inequalities and make people think twice about what they had before. Large international conflicts like World War I or World War II also make people think twice. Look, after World War I, in the 1920s, people blamed people blamed globalization for causing World War I. People blamed globalization for causing World War I. What were they going to do? They were going to grow their own vegetables in their front yard so that they could be self-sufficient, so they no longer had to rely on foreign producers of food. They thought themselves to be so vulnerable to the whims of the global economy. And in Austria and Eastern Europe, this was very popular. Did it save us from another war? No. Would it have saved us from another war had Hitler not come along? No. Was that the right answer? No. World War I was caused by political frictions and uncertainty, a breakdown of communication, again, ethnic strife. Not so much because of globalization, but it was there. It was, ready to take the blame, and politicians were ready to do that, and people were willing to believe it, as odd as it may sound.
That's weird. As you say that, I took a trip to Budapest, and in the basement of the market, the lowest level of the market in Budapest is where all the pickled things are. And it's just like, I could not figure out, like, I understand it's a hot, cold environment and it grows and then it doesn't. Pickling is a very responsible way to preserve vegetables. But so what you're saying, it almost seems like they're coming for our vegetables. We better pickle them so we can survive the winter and stave off the enemies. I'm just seeing that mentality written across Eastern Europe.
Absolutely. Well, I don't think it's just Eastern Europe. You can see that kind of activity in Western Europe too. People who lived through World War II have well-stocked pantries. I've been in the homes of people in Western Europe, say in France, and the pantries are well-stocked. And it was always a curious thought to me, but it all makes sense when they lived through war times, and that's in their living memory. So yeah, that happens.
Yeah, like a survivalist shelter. We've got water, we've got toilet paper.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about. I don't know. Maybe I'm just overly optimistic and just a hopeful, wide-eyed dreamer. But it almost seems to me like with the infrastructure that we've built, the global connectivity that we've built via like shipping and the fact that we can grow food indoors and things like that now with the technology of how to do that, it kind of takes some of that sting out of that argument. Like if someone were to say they're coming for our vegetables, we can grow them on the balcony or something. I don't know. And the more the technology helps us in that regard, helps us to provide food, clothing, shelter for ourselves, that the less that becomes a thing to be afraid of. So maybe that argument loses a little bit of its sting when it's thrown out there as a cause for war or invasion.
Well, I think the causality goes the other way, if I can use a technical term, right? I mean, you do have concern in places like China or even Japan that They are vulnerable to loss of market supply of crucial things like not just oil, but, soybeans, the staple crop. So there is concern. And what's interesting, right, is that concern kind of feeds itself. When countries become pessimistic about the future, they start to implement these controls, and that kind of whittles away at this integration that we've seen. And that decrease in globalization really puts us at risk. It heightens the feeling and the atmosphere in the global economy and amongst the politicians that everyone's out to get us. Now we need to protect ourselves. So, at least since the first administration of Donald Trump, we've been worried about these strategic sectors and these strategic goods. The Biden administration carried through. We've got to protect solar. We've got to protect semiconductors. We've got to protect electrical generation and the new technologies like batteries. Those sorts of things have been front and center of people's minds. But they're kind of self-defeating, right? The moment people start talking like that, globalization decreases and we put ourselves at risk. That's the way we're going, unfortunately.
Like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Almost.
Yes. Yeah. Let's get back to where we are now, as much as I really don't want to talk about it. So if you have observed the cycles, the windfalls and the whatevers, how do you see a pattern that could help us to understand where we might go in the future?
I mentioned the word uncertainty before, and for you and me alike, I think there's just a lot of uncertainty. But let's think about it. You had a dominant superpower, the United States, the hegemon, if you will, since 1989, since the fall of the Berlin Wall. The U.S. has really been in charge and created great benefits for the rest of the world. Of course, we charged for the quote unquote insurance we were providing for the rest of the world. Insurance is costly, but by and large, I think it was a good deal for most countries that were willing to participate. We're not there anymore. We have another rising superpower, China. We have Russia, which wants to be a local hegemon. Now we have Iran and the Middle East fighting a war against the U.S. and Israel, two local hegemons attempting to assert dominance. This world is a more fractionalized world. It's more fractured. It's a world that can be very unstable, similar to the 1920s and 1930s. Contrast that with the 19th century when Britain was basically the world's superpower, policed the oceans, was the main economic powerhouse of the time, relative world peace. In the 1920s, the United States, Germany, and Britain were all kind of vying for supremacy. And that didn't work out so well. A lot of instability, no country willing to provide those public goods of international defense, a rules-based order. What we saw was yes, collapse, conflict, hunger. And I really hope we're not going there. Try to be optimistic about these things, but that is the closest precedent I think we have to this period we're living through, the 1920s and 1930s.
Well, if you look at the goods that are on the table, the things that keep us alive, food, clothing, shelter, et cetera, and you look at our ability to produce them or manufacture them or grow them or whatever, it seems like since those days we have learned an awful lot about how to provide those things, how to make them, but also how to do them responsibly, like in harmony with the planet. Does that give you any hope? Like does that add a layer of hope to your projections so that we're not just going through this cycle again, but maybe somewhere along the line in the future, if this ever rears its head again, we'll see that this isn't really a thing worth fighting for, because there is plenty for everyone. We have mastered the elements to a place where we can provide these things for everyone.
Well, my first answer was going to be not really, but I see where you're going with this, and I like it. I think if we collectively can shake the fear of integration off, we could be a whole lot better off. And the global economy can bring great gains, diversifying our supply networks, making us more productive, making us better off, making us, just more resilient. Once that creeping fear of integration comes in, I think, all bets start to be off, and every country kind of scrambles for what it can do. Now, the United States is in a privileged position. It's a big economy, a large population, and pretty self-reliant. But, our neighbor to the north, Canada, isn't in such a position. Singapore is not in that position. Many European countries aren't in that position. And even here we worry, has manufacturing gone away? Is it gone forever? Can we really make the things we need? And you don't have to worry in a global economy. Someone else is going to make it for you. The market will prevail. And Econ 1 tells us to trust in the market. But the moment you start to worry and fear the uncertainty and the possibility that this could all go away one day, you start to hunker down, and that just kind of resonates with everyone else and reverberates, and the economy goes into retraction mode, and the global economy shrinks. We see the rise of autocrats, totalitarianism, fascism, anti-democratic movements. We see greater conflict. We're living through it right now, like our ancestors did in the 20s and 30s. And we never thought we were going to be here, but we're here.
It's almost like, if I were a sci-fi writer, I would say we need an alien invasion to unite us, to create that object that we can all focus our vitriol on, so we can get about the business of surviving and maybe working together in defense of our species or our planet or something.
Well, I'll take an alien any day, but climate change is the existential threat, and it hasn't really unified us, unfortunately. So who knows what would happen if aliens showed up on our doorstep? Maybe everyone would, try to sell everyone else out, and it'd be a vicious fight for survival, every country for itself. I don't know if it would unify us. If anything should have done it, should have been climate change, and I'm not seeing evidence for that.
Yeah.
It's sad.
It really is. I do see some bright spots, some little slivers of light under the door as it kind of cracks open. In that there are global consortiums. We have a few of our faculty actually one of our faculty members that serves on a global consortium of climatologists who say that the work that's being done is positive. There are people out there who get it. There's a lot of people are taking the message seriously. Just not domestically. We haven't really embraced it here. We're still calling it a hoax or whatever. But when you see Saudi Arabia investing in green energy, you've got to say, what's that all about? What do they know that we don't, or what are they willing to accept that we are not? So I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. But I'm going to take it back to another. There's no such thing as talking about something economically that's not going to piss somebody off. But another red flag, tariffs. I looked at the imposition of tariffs as being one of the first pulling out of the Jenga blocks and just saying, I dare you to stay up almost, what do you think about that? I know this is one of your specialties.
Tariffs are back. Tariffs are 5 times higher than they were in, say, 2015. They're averaging about 10% now in this country. They used to be about 2%, very low, almost non-existent. We didn't have to worry about them. They're back. I say they're back because this country was a high tariff nation all the way through until World War II. We had tariffs of 20, 30, 40% protecting our industries. But after World War II, we issued tariffs and got rid of barriers to trade, and commerce flourished. and it was a very peaceful period. Tariffs are back now. Tariffs are costly. Tariffs raise the price of the things we like to consume that come from abroad. They raise prices. They reduce employment. They make it costly to operate a company because now you don't have those inputs that you once got from all over the world that were so vital to your production process. So they're going to be costly for the economy. They're going to favor special interests, those that get special deals or those that might survive a little bit better with this protection from foreign competition. But that's a real small fraction of the economy. The rest of us are going to pay for it. And so the return of tariffs has not been pleasant. But I think the global economy was fractured even before. The World Trade Organization was supposed to lead us to a path of prosperity. And this government, the United States, had kind of bailed on its obligations in the World Trade Organization, even in the Obama administration. And so we're seeing cracks already in the facade of global integration. Now, we didn't have to go this way. We might have gone in a different direction. We might have gone towards regional trade agreements and something a little more specific and local. And that would have been a good direction to go. But instead, we've gone towards higher tariffs, build a big wall around our country, shelter industry with tariffs, and create animosity around the world. Luckily, retaliation has not been so fast and furious, but I think these are early days still, and retaliation is maybe it's yet to come. And when it does, it's not going to benefit us either.
Yeah. It's been interesting, to watch this whole thing unfold. Again, I did see that as almost like the first shot fired over the bow, and saying, hard times may be coming, because what I've understood about the entire dynamic of tariffs is that when they've been called out for being wrong, it's because of the way they've been imposed, the legal process of actually putting them in place. It's unconstitutional, these ones, so we're going to have to repeal them. No one's actually said, this is going to kill us economically. I mean, people have said it, but not in any capacity where they could actually affect their implementation or not. Has the issuance of tariffs become a purely political device, or is there any economic voice out there that can inform our footfalls forward?
Tough question. I think you're right. The opponents of tariffs have used any means necessary to push back, and legal arguments have won the day with the Supreme Court ruling a few weeks ago that established the non-constitutionality of the IEEPA tariffs. There are more cards up the sleeve of that administration. They will find another way to impose tariffs. They're working on it as we speak. Are tariffs going to kill the economy? They're probably not going to kill the economy. They're not good for the economy. They're going to hurt. They're going to pinch. But again, if retaliation comes, if foreign countries start to retaliate against our companies and our exports, the pain will be even greater. And, we're going to feel the pinch, but our trade partners, our allies, are going to get hit harder. And that's not a pleasant world to live in when people are unsettled and their way of life, economically speaking, is in danger. So that's just going to create more instability. So, we'll see where we go from here. But I think higher tariffs are here for the foreseeable future.
Oh, the foreseeable future is a long time. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about. I'm going to put you on the spot because you are an expert in all these things, and because you have studied these trends in history, and that might have given you a little bit more insight than the average schmo like me would have about what the future would look like. I want to ask you. I'm going to make you king of the world at 2 p.m. What are your first orders? Like, what do you do to fix this, to make this all go away and make it better and make life lovely and productive and more experiential than worrisome?
You've really put me on the spot. That's a tough one. I'm an avowed believer in the power of the market and free trade. I believe in globalization. And I would start by repealing the tariffs. I'd reinvigorate the World Trade Organization. And, I would embrace globalization as a force for good. I would increase diplomatic pressure on our trade partners that didn't necessarily play by the rules that we would like. But I would do that in conjunction with our allies. And I wouldn't burn so many bridges between our allies. Together we would be stronger. The direction we're going right now is isolationist, unilateral, let's go it alone. No one's picking up the phone when we call and ask for assistance. And it's, surprise, surprise. So at 2 p.m. when I become king, I'm going to be back on the multilateral thing, and I'm going to be pushing that hard, and I'm going to be saying the market will solve our problems, and if it doesn't, let's think about the smart, evidence-based policies that can dull the sharp edges of what the market gives us. Let's think about the safety net a little more. Let's think about those policies that we know work and that can reduce some of those costs of the market. Hey, I'm not here to say the market comes for free. The market yields winners, it yields losers. It's up to us to take care of the people who don't benefit as much. And it's totally possible to do that, given what we know. Let's think harder about that. So that's the direction I'm going. Would it work? I hope so. Not everyone's going to play by my rule book. We gotta make sure we're not vulnerable. We've got to have national defense be strong, and that's a concern. But we could do that and not burn so many bridges at the same time, and rebuild that multilateral rules-based system that we had for so long.
That's a great answer. I'll vote for you as king of the world. At 155, I'm putting my vote in that box. Let me dig down into some of the more minutiae, some of the ground level implementations of the philosophy that you just kind of suggested. Social programs, social support programs, they seem to have been traditionally beneficial to the economy, to the workforce. When we've had people SNAP benefits, things like that, things that have just been kind of like canceled. That's a snap of a finger, no pun intended, although I'll take it. I'll own that. I was pun intended. So, like Social Security, there are longstanding things that have really benefited us as human beings. And there are some people who are experimenting with universal basic income, just things that make us feel more secure and make us, in turn, I think, evidence has shown more productive over time. We are a happier, more productive society when we take care of the weakest among us. That makes us feel good. That brings out a nurturing tribal feeling among us. And if we can do that on a larger scale, it seems to me that would be a good thing. Do you support these things, or where do you draw the line about how would you take care of people?
Interesting questions here. I'm not the expert, to the full degree of all of our social safety net programs, but what I would say is the following. First, there's some bigger things you didn't mention that can improve things dramatically. Let's talk about worker training and getting our education system right. We have many failing students. They're not doing as well as our peers abroad, and we could do a whole lot better there. Let's pay our teachers a living wage. Let's incentivize good outcomes in education, and the policies there are many and known. Worker training, adjustment facilities for industries that have been harmed by trade. Those are, obvious things to do. Let's talk about science. There's been a pushback on science and innovation in this country. Science is under attack. Innovation is the key to global prosperity and our nation's prosperity. And so when we cut funding for our nation's scientists and make it harder to hire the best and brightest from all over the world, we are really doing ourselves no favors. So we got to boost innovation. We've got to keep the education up. Okay, so those are places to start. And then there's just a whole raft of social safety net policies, which I agree are important. Healthcare, SNAP, housing. These are all big issues. Let's learn from the data. There's so many countries out there that we can learn from. We've got this whole world. It's a naturally occurring laboratory. Let's learn from the data. Let's learn from our social scientists who have been looking at this. Let's look at best practice in healthcare and housing and social safety nets and learn from the best. And I think there's just so much room for improvement here. We can do it better, and we must. And that, like you said, I think it'll make us feel better. It'll help us grow, and it will lead to very good outcomes. So, yeah, I'm all in. Thank you for your vote.
And it seems to me like if we invest in those higher level things in science, in education, the trickle down effect will take care of some of those more granular elements. Like I would leave it in the hands of a social scientist or an economist to figure out how do we manage money? How do we distribute things more on a more egalitarian basis so that we are not creating pain. We have a system that produces as little pain as we possibly can produce. So I appreciate that. Again, you have my vote. You should run.
Much appreciated.
Any hopeful words to the wise or advice for those of us who are just watching this whole thing? We have no fingernails left because we bit them off in hoping that we all survive next year.
Well, I think from the historical perspective, we have to be somewhat optimistic. Things go up, things go down. To say things have never been this bad is not consonant with history. We've gone through rough times. We'll go through them again. Let's have some hope. But we have to be active participants in our own future. And so the two things I would emphasize are, again, don't lose faith in the market. Don't lose faith in the market. The market helps us. Economists have shown this. It's a reliable way to improve our standards of living. And let's not give up on democracy. Democracy is a competitive form of government that, once in a while we get the chance to rehire or fire our public servants. If we're not satisfied, we fire them. If we're satisfied, they keep going. Let's not give up on democracy. Let's reboot and instill those virtues which are necessary for democracy. And with that will come prosperity and economic growth. So we need to not lose faith in the idea of the market and democracy. Although many people question it these days, let's not lose faith.
And you know what? That sounds an awful lot like us. Like citizens of this country. I mean, I think we've all grown up hearing those messages. That's who we are. We're part of a great country. We're empowered. We're participants in our own well-being. We just got to get up off our butts and do the right thing. So it sounds pretty consistent with what I grew up hearing anyway. So thank you for that. Is there anything else we missed? Anything you want to touch on?
I think we've covered a lot of ground. Let's remain hopeful and optimistic for the future. And if I promise to do that, I hope you will too.
Yes, absolutely. And I will share that. Everybody out there, do the same. We're like, it's just manifest. That's a whole nother podcast. Okay, well, thank you for joining us today. It's been a great conversation.
Absolutely.
Sincerest thanks to today's guest, Chris Meissner. If you'd like to learn more about Chris's work, check out our YouTube page for links to his bio, books, articles, research, and more. And thank you for joining Minds Over Matters today. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Please subscribe, share with your friends, and spread the word. We have a lot to say. We guarantee something for everyone. Minds Over Matters is hosted by Ed Kiggins. produced by the College of Letters and Science at UC Davis, and filmed at the Larry Chandler Memorial Studio. Thank you for listening. See you next time.